Thank you all for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it for supporting the writing major and everybody in the writing department. I'm going to read a little creative nonfiction piece that I actually wrote in Robert Fleet's class last fall. Go creative nonfiction. But this piece is about my parents actually, so that's why I'm recording it for my mom. But just as a brief trigger warning, there is brief talk of firearms, shooting, and blood. It's mentioned only really in passing, so don't be too alarmed. It's really okay. Everything's okay in the end. Disclaimer. But my piece is titled "Even Forrest Gump Couldn't Have Predicted This One." So thanks again for you guys for coming, and here I go. As the sun was rising in the central Pennsylvania woods, Dan climbed up the ladder into his tree stand just like he would any other time he would go hunting. He had his muzzleloader gun slung over his shoulder, which jostled left and right slightly as he ascended. He had on his camouflaged hunting pants, shirt, and jacket. On his head, he had a fluorescent orange beanie that was required by law to wear. Upon making it to the top of the ladder and his seat on the tree stand, Dan carefully sat down and surveyed the woods in front of him at this new height, searching for any signs of wildlife to observe, but specifically deer to shoot. With the sun now being up and Dan having taken a new elevated position, he could feel the warmth of the sun radiating off of him and he knew he had slightly overlayered his clothing. Careful of the gun laying across his lap, he took off his beanie first, just to let his head cool down. Then he shimmied out of his jacket, grateful that there weren't any deer in his immediate vicinity because it was rustling around in the tree. His jacket now off and just a long sleeve camouflage shirt remaining, Dan settled back into his seat and tried to make as little noise as possible. That quiet lull is when he heard the pop of a smaller gun go off to his bottom right and turn toward the noise, only to have everything go black a beat later. My parents got married on October 7th, 1995. They'd been in a relationship since the 8th grade when they were both attending Selinsgrove Area High School. My dad moved there in the 7th grade, and my mom was born and raised in Selinsgrove. They both graduated high school in 1977, and my dad, Dan, went off to Williamsport Area Community College to become an engineer, and my mom, Tana, went to Albright College on a pre-med track. My mom had been through medical school and was a resident at Geisinger Medical Center in Danville, Pennsylvania. Dad was working for his family contracting business, helping to run it since his grandfather, who previously owned it, had passed away. Fortunately, my dad had a day off upon returning home from my parents' honeymoon for the hunting season, so he set out for the woods while my mom went to work. Tana was going about her usual day as a radiology resident, doing what she needed to do and learning what she could. She had just picked up her wedding photos from the photographer the day before, and they were laying all over her desk in the closet-like room where all of the radiology residents worked. Residents and doctors going in and out stopped to admire them and say the typical lines that are expected when looking at wedding photos. It was a typical morning in her new life as a wife. 3-ish hours into her shift, my mom got a phone call from a nurse in the emergency room that she was friends with. She didn't even let my mother say hello before she began talking. "Tana, are you sitting down?" she asked in a very level voice. "Yes, I am. What's going on?" my mom replied. "I'm going to need you to come down to the ER," she continued. "Dan's been shot." My dad doesn't remember the first few minutes after being shot. From what he's told, the 15-year-old kid that shot him was skipping school to go hunting and wasn't supposed to legally be in the woods with a firearm by himself. When the boy realized it wasn't a squirrel he shot, but my dad, he freaked out and ran to the nearest house. The man that owned the property that my dad was hunting on, Ralph, had been a friend of my parents for a very, very long time. So was his wife, who consequently was the ER nurse that called my mom. The boy ran to Ralph's house, and they both rushed back out to meet my dad. In the meantime, my dad regained consciousness and assessed his position. He was hanging forward from the tree, held in by a chest strap situated like a seatbelt. He felt the warm blood running down the front of his face where the bullet had grazed his forehead. His neon orange beanie had fallen to the ground at the base of the tree, which was lucky for Ralph and the boy, as it was how they more easily located him. Leaving his muzzleloader in the tree, but tying his jacket around his shoulders, my dad unstrapped himself and began descending the tree stand by his ladder. Ralph and the boy found my dad halfway through his descent from the tree. "Dan, what the hell do you think you're doing? Get your ass down here," Ralph yelled at my dad as he ran closer, the boy on his heels. My dad isn't sure if what he said was completely coherent, but what he wanted to say was, "What the hell do you think I'm doing, Ralph?" He made himself laugh, but laughing hurt his head too much, so he stopped quickly. Upon making it to the ground, Ralph eased my dad onto his back and took his jacket from around his shoulders. Folding the jacket under his head, Ralph figured he should try to slow the bleeding while the ambulance he called was on its way. In his worry, Ralph saw my dad have a little shady grin on his face. "What the hell are you smiling about, Dan?" My dad must have looked terrifying with blood pouring down his face, a gash on his forehead, and smiling like a dumbass. "At least I didn't get shot in the buttocks," my dad answered, reminiscing. One of the multitude of dates that my parents went on before they got married was to see Forrest Gump in July of 1994. They'd been engaged for a year or more at that point. My mom didn't want to get married until she was a decent way through residency and had made it through medical school, so they waited to get married until 1995. My parents loved Forrest Gump, still do, and they wouldn't stop using Forrest's Alabama accent for months after seeing the film. My dad's favorite line was, "I've been shot in the buttocks," and my mom's was, "Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get." And I feel like these choices are very representative of their personalities, so do with that what you will. Whenever my dad would have the slightest bruise or scrape from work, he would say that at least he wasn't shot in the buttocks. He didn't realize how much that would come back to bite him in the ass. My mom made it to the ER and found Ralph's wife waiting for her. She assured Tana that Dan was in the ambulance and that Ralph had been with him until they loaded my dad in the stretcher and whisked him away in the ambulance. When telling the story, my mom always insists that standing behind the reception desk in the lobby was the longest 10 minutes of her life. The ambulance riding was like flipping through a frame-by-frame picture book, according to Tana. Frame 1. The ambulance arrives with a screech. The picture would be a blur of the back right side of the ambulance, the door may be slightly starting to swing open. Frame 2. The doors are wide open, one EMT is on the ground and has the base of the stretcher in his hands. You can see my dad's feet in his hunting boots from where my mom is standing from the front corner of the reception desk and through the glass doors. You see another EMT on the left of the stretcher lowering it to the ground in just the hands of the one on the right. The stretcher is on the ground in frame 3 and is turning towards the doors already, my dad's feet first. My mom is getting her first good look at him through the glass. She sees his forehead completely wrapped in bandages, spots of blood starting to show through where the wound is. His eyes look like they're slightly open. The EMTs have descended from the ambulance and are on the same sides of the stretcher, and the one that must have been at my dad's head was sprinting to open the doors. The moment my dad came through the doors, time started flowing again. The EMTs were saying things to each other that only they could comprehend quickly, though my mom with her medical knowledge was picking up on things here and there, such as trauma, CCs, B negative, and so on. My mom didn't have more than 2 minutes with my dad as they took him back through the ER doors. He was conscious and recognized my mom's presence. The one thing that he said to her before getting wheeled back was, "Hell of a way to start a married life, huh?" with a trademark sardonic Dan smile. She knew that she wouldn't be able to go back with him while they were stitching him up and doing a head trauma assessment, so she hung back at the corner of the reception desk. Ralph's wife was among those who went back with my dad, but the doctor on duty in the ER was someone that Tana had worked with before many times. Mom always rolls her eyes when telling this part. The ER doctor stopped before going back to start my dad's assessments to quickly talk to her. "He'll be all right, Tana," he reassured her, seeing the tears running down her cheeks. "The wound looks mostly superficial, but he lost a good amount of blood. He stayed conscious for the ride here and seemed to have a decent flow of thoughts, but the EMTs said they didn't follow them very well. He mentioned something about shot and buttocks, which they couldn't fully make sense of." My mom laughed out loud. "Oh, Doc, thank you for that. I think he'll be okay too." The doctor shrugged with a smile and turned towards the doors. One hand on the door, he turned around quickly. "Tana?" "Yes, Doc?" "Those are some awful nice hunting boots your husband had on," he said. My mom didn't respond to the offhand comment except with a quizzical look. "If he kicks the bucket, can I be the first to claim them?" Tana says she felt her face bland and slacken from shock. "I'm kidding, please, I'm not completely cool," the doctor joked. "I'll send someone out when we're done with his assessment." He disappeared through the doors, leaving my mom with her anger ebbing and relief taking its place. "I'm just really glad I wasn't left a widow after being married for a month," Mom chuckled. They tell this story pretty often. It's the summer before my sophomore year of college. My parents and I are at our dinner table in our family home in Selinsgrove that we lived in since April 2007. We just eaten a dinner of grilled chicken, broccoli, rice, and glazed carrots around 5 p.m., our usual dinner time. It was a Friday night. My dad had 3 or so beers to celebrate the work week being over. "Yeah, well, I'm glad the doctor liked my boots. You know how sensitive I am about my fashion choices," my dad deadpanned. He really doesn't give a shit. Proving this point, he was wearing the same gym shorts that he had been wearing for the past 2 days after getting home from work, an Ithaca College t-shirt that I bought him, and his pair of beat-up black pair of Adidas slides. He rubbed his forehead where the scar is gone, but if you rub around enough, you can feel the screw and metal plate that they put over his skull where the bullet grazed it. The kid that shot him got off with a warning and his parents got fined, but my dad didn't pursue any further charges against him. My mom was just glad that Dad survived the incident with no more than a slight concussion and a metal plate. Dad was a dumb kid once, though he never shot anybody, and was feeling altruistic apparently, so he didn't feel the need to press charges. Walking away with his life and mind intact was enough. Every time my parents tell this story, though, they share a loving look at the end. No matter how much they bitch and moan about each other and to each other, the lifetime that they have spent together, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, health runs to a bond they can't